What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the College Sports Connection podcast, where Double A, Alex, and AJ host the Mid-American Conference Best.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the CSC Podcast, all action, all the time. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Joining me, as always, it's AJ the Guru.
What's going on, everybody?
AJ, welcome back. It is MAC Championship weekend, and we've got a heavyweight title game between Toledo, sitting at 11-1, Miami sitting at 10-2, a combined 21-3 record on the season. There's a lot we could expect, and there's a lot of unexpected right on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. This one's interesting because we've talked about it in the past that these two teams haven't faced each other in a number of years, and here they are facing each other twice in the same year.
Mm-hmm. Just the second time that they've done that since, or in their history. The last time being the 2004 season when they split the series. Toledo lost in Oxford 23-16. In October of 2004, turns it around and wins in the MAC championship 35-27 over that same Miami team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's really interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of storylines in this game on both sides of the ball. Toledo's really, you look at the Toledo as a whole, they're one, maybe two plays away from being undefeated this year, losing that tight one against Illinois. And then we have Miami of Ohio, who's kind of battled. There's a lot of adversity this year. Starting with Gabber going down early on and Davion Smith taking the reins and moving them to Detroit. And we were lucky enough to see him last year against Cincinnati, and we know he can ball. And he ended up playing a lot of last year and a lot of this year. So I think that's a great thing for Coach Martin, having a quarterback who has time. Unlike last year where we had a quarterback issue going into this game with injuries as well. Now we have a game where both quarterbacks are set, and it's go time.
Well, and I think, when you look at it a little bit closer, Avion Smith, and we'll talk about this kind of a little bit more in our positional breakdowns. But Avion Smith, last year he was kind of just given the reins, like, hey, here you go. And you're right, he had his growing pains. And I think this year was a little bit different because he was at least familiar. He wasn't just thrust into the starting role. I mean, he was this year, but it wasn't without experience. He started 8 games last year, something like that. And I think now we see a much more mature Avion Smith. But, I mean, let's just kind of get into it. We'll start with our position groups. We'll start with the quarterbacks. And I've got my notes here. Avion Smith, I do think he's a fantastic substitute. Like I said, has starting experience from a year ago. And really, since taking over for Brett Gabbert, they went 4-0. Not something people expected. However, when you look at the numbers, when you really zoom in on it a little bit, it's very clear Miami doesn't want to make him pass more than they need to. He's only throwing around 52% completion percentage. And since taking over as the starting quarterback, he has pass attempts in the following order: 11 pass attempts, 17, 16, and 24. He's only topped 150 yards in a game once, and that was the Ball State game last week where he went 14 of 24, 170 yards, 1 score, and 2 interceptions. I like DeQuan Finn in this matchup a lot better. One, he's got the experience. He's been here. He brings a physical, presence to his position. He's very fluid, but he has the experience. This year he has 21 touchdowns, nearly 2,400 passing yards. He's fantastic at extending plays. For me, I think the experience alone gives DeQuan Finn the edge, and I got to go Toledo in this one because even if DeQuan Finn goes down, you've got a healthy Tucker Gleason who looked really good last year as well.
Yeah, again, Tucker Gleason's a guy who's played, and did he play at all in that championship game last year?
Right? I don't think he played in the championship. He played the week before in the Western Michigan game.
That's what it was.
And he played I want to say he started 4 or 5 games last year, including the Bowling Green game in which he had 4 touchdowns. But yeah, I mean, I really like Toledo's edge in the QB room for this matchup.
Yeah, I think so too. I think kind of all around. I mean, obviously the record shows that Toledo's 8-0 in the conference, 11-1 overall. Miami Redhawks are 10-2, 7-1 in the conference. For as close as those numbers are, you kind of look at the overall, and DeQuan Finn has the and not just DeQuan, but I think the Toledo offense has just a better overall. I think you kind of look at Penny Boone and Jacques Stewart, uh, Finn. Offensively, I think just more well rounded on that side of the ball than Miami of Ohio is.
Kind of diving into that Penny Boone mention, I've in doing my pre-game rankings, I gave the entire edge offensively to Toledo, the QBs, the running backs, the wide receiver and the tight ends. Talk about Penny Boone. Now the newly crowned MAC Offensive Player of the Year. They say it all the time. The biggest or the best thing you can do is to be available, right? And he has been available. He has not gotten
Best
hurt.
ability is your availability.
Yeah, that's the quote. He has been absolutely excellent. He combined with Jacques Stewart and Willie Shaw, they've combined for almost 2,000 rushing yards and 20 touchdowns on the year. Now, granted, Penny Boone does get the lion's share of that. But Stewart and Shaw, they're both excellent as change of pace backs, kind of keep the defense off balance. Penny Boone's the bruiser. Stewart and Shaw, they got a little bit more finesse, a little bit more side to side to them. Miami brings two running backs who have had to pick up the bulk of the work since the injury to Brett Gabbert, purely to help take that pressure off Avion Smith. Again, not that Avion Smith is a bad quarterback, but when you look at Rashad Amos and Kenny Tracy, both of them are averaging more than 5 yards a carry this year. And they're both pretty good as receivers as well. They have combined over 1,200 yards and 12 scores on the ground. Now, something of note, since Brett Gabbert went down, Avion Smith has accounted for 6 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. So I think that's something that's worth looking at. You see how much more they're relying on Rashad Amos versus when Brett Gabbert was starting at quarterback.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that they're really going to have to focus on here too, going into this game, because Toledo's defense is no joke either.
Right.
Everybody on that side of the ball has stepped up this year. You talk about Amos, 820 yards on the ground, and then
Kenny Tracy.
Tracy was only 250. So there is quite a disparity there. But again, they're both averaging over 5 yards a carry, and they are one block away from breaking it.
Yeah.
And Amos has had a long as 66 this year, and Tracy's had a long as 42. So they're both capable of breaking it. Just the offensive line, they can create a lane of either of those running backs. And Avion Smith, too, he can run the ball as well. He's no slouch on that side of the ball either. But I think they're going to be really cautious of how they use him, because this isn't going to be the last game of the year for these guys.
Right. Absolutely. And I think it's going to be important to see just how much they rely on them and how efficient they can be. Kind of moving into the wide receivers and tight ends, there are only 3 players currently who rank in the top 10 in the MAC as a receiver in both yards per game and touchdowns. One of them could very well be limited or not even play this week. Gage Larvadain from Miami has 6 touchdowns and leads in yards per game. He's only played 8 games this year. Is listed currently on the injury report as questionable. That's something to kind of monitor over the next couple of days. But then you've got Juwan Newton and Junior Vandeross, who both rank in the top 10. They've combined for 14 touchdowns on the year. Now, Gage, when you look at this Miami offense, you talk about Rashad Amos and Kenny Tracy. Gage is kind of their big man wide receiver. He's kind of the one who just kind of leads everything. Like I said, he's got 625 yards on the year. But then they've got a whole slew of other receivers who are really good. Javon Tracy, Joe Wilkins, and Cade McDonald, all who have more than 20 catches on the year, all who have over 300 yards on the year, all who have at least 1 touchdown. When you look at Javon Tracy, that's actually Kenny Tracy's brother. Fun fact for you. So it's kind of cool for them to get to play football together. But when you look at what they all bring to the table, I think it's very important that if Miami throws, you've got to spread it out. You can't just pepper Gage the whole time. You have to really understand you have other players on the field. Now, again, Newton and Vandeross, they do average less yards per game than Gage does, but Newton has 9 scores, Vandeross has 4, and the rest of the Miami receiving core only has 6 touchdowns. The primary receiving core only has 6 receiving touchdowns on the year after Gage. So they're like you mentioned with the running backs, there's a huge drop off. Same thing with this receiving core. And that's not a bad thing. That just shows you how much they trust what Gage has done, how much he really brings to the table. Toledo, they have a much deeper room of tight end and wide receivers with 4 players who have at least 2 touchdowns, aside from Newton and Vandeross. And that's both of their tight ends as well. Both their tight ends have multiple receiving touchdowns. Toledo, I like their depth purely because they just have so many guys they can just chuck the ball up to, and they know the guy's going to come down with it.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about tight ends there for a second. I want to go back to Miami of Ohio. If Larvin Dane does not play, you look at the 3 tight ends here: Jack Goldiron, Luke Bolton, and Nate Mercich. Combined, they only have 6 receptions
and 1 touchdown.
1 touchdown.
Yeah.
So if Gage isn't playing, will they rely on tight end play at all, or will they just use their tight end strictly in the run blocking game?
I imagine it'll probably be run blocking game. When you look at the stats, like you mentioned, they have 6 receptions overall on the year.
Yeah.
Like they have a combined 53 receiving yards. I don't see them as a team who's going to all of a sudden turn to their tight ends, but who knows? It depends on what Chuck Martin has kind of cooked up. You mentioned the Toledo defense and how stacked they are. I do not disagree. However, I do think while Toledo may have the edge in the cornerbacks, safeties, and defensive backs, Miami has the massive edge on the linebacker side. And here's what I was looking at.
That was the first thing that was going to bring up here.
Yep.
The matchup between Dallas Gant and Matt Salopek is going to be very, very intriguing.
I really like Miami's linebackers. Matt Salopek and Ty Wise are both top 5 in the MAC in total tackles. They have a combined 233 tackles on the year. They also have a combined 15.5 tackles for loss. Yes, you mentioned Dallas Gant, who by his own right is a superstar, right? He's an elite linebacker with his 97 tackles. However, Daniel Bolden, his other primary linebacker, sits far lower in the MAC standing. He sits at 13th with just 5 tackles for loss. When you look at that, I think it's a testament to what Matt Salopek and Ty Wise have done for Miami and what they really bring to the table, because it shows you just how good they are because they've needed to be. I mean, there's a reason Miami only allows 16 points a game. You got to credit the linebackers for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of look deeper into it. Miami of Ohio's rocking with 33 sacks, Toledo with 34. So across the board, they're fairly even when getting pressure on the quarterback.
Toledo has more guys doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you look at the Toledo list of guys who've had tackles this year. It's a 1.5 miles long.
Yeah.
Pretty
sure Jason Candle has his coaches going out there making tackles.
Absolutely. I mean, heck, there could be some photo people and some social media people on here that we don't even know about.
Right.
A shout out to my guy Darius Alexander, Fort Wayne. I called some of his games in high school, way back in the day.
Yep.
Fort Wayne High School. But yeah, I think when it comes up to statistically and how the matchup, I should say, let's use that word, the matchup. I think the defenses are the most intriguing of this entire game because we got to know what Toledo's going to bring offensively. They're going to spread the ball. They have receivers and running backs who can catch the ball, running backs who can run. Yep. That's not going to be the issue. I think the matchup really comes down to, on the defensive side of the ball, who gets pressure on the quarterbacks, who's going to force the quarterback to make the most mistakes. Is Salopek going to get after Finn and force him to throw it into the ground, or sack fumbles or interceptions, or same thing the other way? Is Dallas Gant going to get after Avion Smith and force him to make bad decisions? Because it's going to be very interesting. Even though Dallas Gant only has 1 sack on the year, with 45 solo tackles and 51 assisted for a total of 96, there's going to be some pressure from all angles on both sides. So I think for me, that's the most intriguing thing about this game.
I think that's a very intriguing thing too. For me, it's about the backfield on the defensive side. That's going to be the big one. I think, Miami for me gets the slight edge on the linebackers, but Toledo, when you really look at what they bring up with the corners, safeties, and the defensive backs, you're really hard pressed to tell me that the team with a reigning All-American isn't going to be the better pass defense team, right?
Mhm.
When you look at Quinyon Mitchell's numbers, they are overall lower than last season, and he only has 17 passes defended on the year. That's still the most in the MAC. There's only one interception, but there are 16 passes broken up. And then when you pair him with Chris McDonald, RJ Delancey, and Maxon Hook, there are 34 pass breakups, 7 interceptions, and a couple touchdowns. Now, that's a good pass defense. I mean, they rank number 1 in the conference, and for good reason, right? You look at what Quinyon does. There's a reason his numbers are lower. People are afraid to throw that way. Quarterbacks know the chances of a completion are very low, and the chances of an interception are pretty high. So you don't try to pick on Quinyon Mitchell, or you do, and you get burned, and then you turn away from him the rest of the game.
Right.
When you look at Miami, they've got Sun McKee, they've got Rayon Strayed. They're both top 5 with Mitchell and McDonald. But then after that, nobody on their unit ranks higher than 27th in the Mid-American Conference in terms of pass defense. And that's highlighted by Michael Dowell.
Yeah.
So I think Toledo's just way deeper on starters in terms of pass defense.
Toledo too here, scoring defense, they're ranked 28th in FBS. Passing defense, they're ranked 23rd. So they're only averaging, let's see here, they've only given up 12 touchdowns, 11 interceptions on the year, averaging about 108, giving up 189 yards or so per game in the passing game. So I think it's going to be really interesting because I think this might come down to a game where Miami of Ohio may have to throw the ball. It's one of those things. Obviously, Rashad Amos, he's going to get his touches, but they're going to have to throw the ball and put it in the air.
Exactly. No, I think you're exactly right on that. It's going to be really interesting to see what they end up doing. Moving into the last kind of the highlight group, I feel like, and I know people are going to say, this is lazy, but I really truly feel like the offensive and defensive lines are both good enough that it's kind of a wash. I watched them both play each other back when Miami and Toledo played. Both sides kind of got a little bit of pressure on each other, but it never felt like one gave into the other. So yes, I understand it's going to feel a little lazy. I'm not going to cover two groups that I feel are competitive washes. To me, I wanted to highlight the kind of the ones that I think had the competitive edge. And in this last group here for the special teams, Graham Nicholson, 100% a Lou Groza Award finalist for a reason. He was perfect on every field goal this year. And he has one missed extra point that was purely due to it being blocked, not because he missed it. Now, Luke Pollock, he has looked excellent this year. He's 10 of 11 on field goals, but I really think the edge belongs to Graham. Graham has a couple 50-yard field goals this year, 50-plus yard field goals this year. But then when you dial it down even more into kick returns, kick blocks, everything a little bit more, Miami has 4 blocked kicks and punts on the season, including game-winning field goals for Cincinnati and Ball State this year. Right. 2 big moments for them. Caden Woolard sits tied at first in the MAC with 2 blocks, while Toledo has 2 blocks on the year total from Quinyon Mitchell and Eric Colley. The punt return team, I think Toledo, they have way more returners. They just rotate guys in, but Miami knows they can trust the receiver, Cade McDonald. He has over 200 return yards with an average of 12.5 yards per return. And then on the kick return team, Toledo, they turned to Jacquez Stewart, and he slots in at 3rd in the MAC for kick returns on all 10 games, and then a kickoff for a touchdown. But I really think the edge goes to Miami purely because defensively, when it comes to preventing points from happening, Miami does it so well. You've got guys who have multiple blocks on the year versus Toledo, who has 2 guys with 1 block. I think you got to give the edge to Miami. They came up big in big moments. To me, it just seems like an obvious choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you go back a couple of games to Miami of Ohio. They beat Ohio 30-16, Akron 19-0, Buffalo 23-10, and squeaked out a win against Ball State 17-15. So they're not giving up a lot of points.
Sure.
Yeah, you kind of look across the board here. I mean, they haven't really given up more than, most was 38 against Miami.
They averaged 20.6 points on the year that they surrender on defense.
Which is not a bad number to be at.
No. Second in the MAC, only behind Toledo, who's giving up 16.4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty good company right there.
I think so too. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And one of the things too, I kind of want to move on to is just the coaching matchup. I think Coach Candle and Coach Martin, got two guys that we've talked to over the years, two guys who have been extremely successful in their programs, two guys who are kind of like the poster child, I think, for the Mid-American Conference. I just think that's a storyline in itself.
Sure. I think, this is Chuck Martin's 10th year at Miami. Jason Candle, he's been there since 2015, the end of 2015. The Toledo Blade posted an article today about how Candle's actually, from assistant to head coach, has been at Toledo since 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Back with, Tim Beckman. Tim Beckman was the head coach at Toledo. So he's been around for a while, and he's really planted his roots here for the last 15 years. And Chuck Martin, excellent job, and he's had quite the career all over college football. And I think these are two coaches who understand the importance of this game, the magnitude of what they're competing for. I don't want to say other coaches don't, but these coaches have been around enough. They have both coached in this game. This is, Chuck Martin's second time in this game. Last time was 2019. I don't hold me to that entirely.
Believe so, yeah.
But I believe that's correct. And then you look at Jason Candle. This is his third MAC championship appearance, and he is very much, he understands what's on the line, and I think Chuck Martin does too. So I'm really excited to see what both of these coaches do and what they kind of bring to the table, which brings me up to my next one. What are your keys to victory? I know we kind of talked, you were going to take 2 or 3 keys to victory for Toledo. I've got my 3 for Miami. Go ahead and talk about Toledo's keys to victory.
Yeah, I think for Toledo, the biggest one is just win the turnover battle. I don't think, you don't want to be in a hole early. And I think we've seen that in the past with, previous games. We did the Kent State Northern Illinois game a couple of years ago. And there was, Kent got into a hole early. And so I think that's one of the things for Toledo is just protect the ball. DeQuan Finn on the year only has 8 interceptions. He's been sacked 9 times. But I think if the offensive line just protects him, lets him get the ball, let him throw the ball down the field to neither Newton or Vanderhorst or Anthony Torres, who's come on strong here as of late, the tight end position. I think if you allow Finn to just distribute to his playmakers, I think that's the biggest thing. And I think too, obviously Toledo's trying to repeat as MAC champions for the first time since 70 and 71. I think just play the game you played all year. You were, like I said, 2, maybe 3 plays away from being undefeated and beating Illinois at Illinois, a game that you were at. So it's not like you've made too many mistakes on the year. Just continue to do what you've done all year long. And I think Toledo's fine.
Yeah, I think you make a good point about Toledo just needs to play their game, play what they've been doing all year. What they've done all year has clearly worked. They're sitting at 11-1. You almost knocked off a Big Ten school earlier in the season playing Toledo football. So yeah, I think you make a really good point on that. For me, I have 3 really kind of, just looking at what Miami's done this year, 3 kind of keys for Miami to win this game. First one, long, sustainable drives. Currently, Miami, they sit at, I want to say, 8th in the MAC in terms of time of possession, and Toledo is dead last. So Toledo sucks at time of possession. Miami's not much better, but if Miami can extend that a little bit and, if they can stay on the field as long as possible in offense, yes, Toledo has the ability to score quickly. They average 6.6 yards per play on the year, but you get Toledo out of rhythm and keep them off the field. You keep them cold on the sideline. That's huge for Miami because Toledo, they're a team who likes to start a little bit slow. We've seen that time and time again. You get off to a hot start and you keep Toledo's offense off the field. Good defensive stops, keeps a cold Toledo offense off the field, slow methodical drives. That can turn the tide in their favor. My second point, don't play too conservative. And I know that's very contrary to what I just said, right? You're like, wait a minute, Alex, you just said, slow, smart drives. Yes. But I still think if you go out and you try to, just run it 3 times in a row, yes, you may pick up a few first downs, but if you become predictable, it's game over. Miami, they're going to need to rely on the ground game. Not that Avion can't pass it, but it's clear what they're looking to do. But I think for them, you got to throw in a few wrinkles. A lateral back pass, so the running back runs up, tosses it back to the quarterback, finds the man deep. You got to throw in those kind of wrinkles. A few end arounds, maybe even a special teams fake on like a 4th and 2. Something to catch Toledo off balance. We literally just saw Central Michigan do that last week against Toledo. It was an obvious punt situation. Central Michigan took off and they got a first and goal pretty much. Get Toledo off their heels. Don't get comfortable playing to not lose. You got to play to win. If you trust Rashad Amos and Tracy in the backfield against the 6th best rush defense in the conference, but you can't solely rely on them. You got to do other things to turn the tide. And then my last one, halftime adjustment. Toledo and Miami played earlier this year in Oxford. Chuck Martin made some phenomenal adjustments at the half. Toledo was up 21-3. Chuck Martin and his team shut Toledo out in the second half, had a couple touchdowns, had a couple opportunities to win that game late. And I really think if Chuck Martin can make those adjustments earlier, even if you're in a hole, if you make those adjustments and you start figuring it out earlier, there's a good chance Toledo loses this game, even against the inexperience of Avion Smith.
Yeah, I think Avion Smith, the moment's not too big for him, I don't think. He's played this game already. They have a scouting report already. They've played against each other.
Mm-hmm.
Miami of Ohio made a comeback in that game.
Yep.
Blaine Gabbert went down until Miami of Ohio made a comeback, and it ended up being 20-17 was the final or something like that, 23-17?
21-17, yeah.
21-17, yeah. So they have the scouting report. They know what to do. I can't imagine that Toledo's game is going to be much different than what it was then. Maybe a few tweaks in, maybe a couple trick plays, who knows? But again, I think everything's going to be pretty straight across the board for both teams. So I think that's a huge advantage for Avion Smith in this one in particular, because he came in, Gabbert got hurt, the second quarter? Right before halftime, right?
Third quarter.
The third quarter, that's right.
Towards the end of the third.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, he played a little bit in that game, but, again, he has the film. And so it's not going to be much different for him this time around.
No, I agree. I think it'll be interesting with these adjustments and what they end up doing. Let's just kind of jump into it a little bit. Some of the game changers. Any game changers that stick out to you? I've got one for both teams here, of course, but for me, I'll just start. I've got Larry Stevens. He's like the 4th receiver in this offense. He has 22 catches, 272 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and he's made a lot of big impact plays for Toledo, with some downfield blocking, some clutch catches when they've needed it. Like I said, about the 4th wide receiver on this team, but he's always been able to do good stuff to help them out. He's been able to be in position to help out Toledo keep moving the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for me, my game changer starts on defense. I think both of mine start on defense, honestly. I'm going to go with Matt Salopek. He's the leader of that defense, as we talked a little bit about earlier. 65 solo tackles, 60 assisted for a total of 125 with 3 sacks, 1 interceptions, 2 pass deflections. I think he's going to be the key for Miami of Ohio to stay in this game, because we know Toledo's going to move the ball. Mm-hmm. It's just going to be a matter of how he handles it. And he's just, consider the green dot. Obviously, don't wear green dots, but he is the green dot of the defense.
Sure.
So I think for him to communicate with the 10 other guys on the defensive side of the ball is going to be massive. I think it's going to be bigger than what most people think when it comes to this game.
I really like going the defense for Miami. But for me, I went kind of with the unheralded game changer. Jaquez Warren. He was my next pick. He has 38 tackles, 4 passes, and 4 passes defended, but all of them have been broken up. He doesn't play a big role, but he plays enough of a role that teams still need to be aware of where he's at, because this is a guy who can come in and he can make some plays when he needs to. I feel like he's an underrated player. When you've got a defense full of Ty Wise, when you've got, Matt Salopek, when you've got, all these other great guys on this Miami defense, he's a guy who doesn't get enough attention. And I think he's a guy to kind of easily overlook on a scouting report.
Absolutely. And he was going to be my next game changer, but I'll move down the list a little bit here to go to the defensive line and give some love to the big boys up front, to Caden Woolard. He has 9.5 sacks on the year, 17 solo tackles, 21 assisted for 38 total. he has 58 sack yards on the season with 1 pass deflection and 2 forced fumbles. The front four of the defensive line who kind of get buried and lost in the mix. You have a guy with 9.5 sacks on the year. He's going to grab the attention of the offensive line coach and the offensive coordinator. So I think if Caden Woolard, if he can put pressure, not just on the quarterback, but in the A and B gaps as well when it comes to Stewart and Boone running, he could be a huge impact as well.
Sure. Let's try to dive into a little bit of this history. I'll just kind of give you my historical notes for this game and for these two teams. Toledo has played in the MAC championship game 7 times. They're currently 4-3. Miami at 5 times at 3-2. This is only the second time they played each other in the MAC title game since 1997. Toledo won again in 2004, 35-27 after Miami beat them that same year in Oxford, 23-16. Miami holds a 28-23-1 overall record against the Rockets. Miami actually has a winning record against every MAC program. Toledo has a winning record against every MAC program except for the aforementioned Miami. They did play each other in October in Oxford, where Toledo won 21-17. I'm really, really excited that this is now the second time that these two teams will play each other in a season after not playing each other dating back to 2011. Toledo's played Ohio State more in that time. They've played Miami, Florida more in that time. They've even played BYU more in that time. They've also played Missouri more in that time. So it's really interesting, how that conference scheduling worked. A drought of 12 years is ended, and now they play each other twice in the same year. We'll do Toledo's New Year's 6 hopes, and then we'll do our quick game predictions.
Let's do it.
Toledo's New Year's 6 hopes, I think, is pretty simple. You cheer for Liberty to lose on Friday. You see Liberty sit there with 1 loss. They're no longer a conference champion, so that eliminates them from the equation. Toledo if you're Toledo, you've got to win this game. Toledo has to absolutely decimate Miami. Of course, you want SMU to win, and I think you want SMU to win. You don't want them to dominate Tulane. You want them to win by 3 or less. I think that's the sweet spot, because then it's a close game that either says either SMU is ranked too low or Tulane's ranked too high. Of note, SMU doesn't have their starting quarterback, so if they win that game close, it's going to be because of their defense. I think they have a top 13 defense in the country. So SMU looks really, really good. So you pray for SMU to win that game close. Then that's a 2-loss SMU and a 2-loss Tulane. Tulane doesn't have a conference championship. Tulane's likely out. But Toledo has to win this game. And I was looking at some historical games where teams have jumped in rankings because of dominant performances. And I came back to you, and you're going to love this one. 2014, Ohio State over Wisconsin. Ohio State obliterated Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship to make the playoffs.
59-0. I was there.
And I think Toledo needs to do something similar in order to have an opportunity to go and be the New Year's 6 representative for the Group of 5 this year. It's likely not enough. It's likely going to be the Quick Lane Bowl or the Cure Bowl for Toledo if they win. But I think those are the 3 keys. If you're Toledo, those are the things you are hoping and praying for.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I was looking at that SMU Tulane game as well as kind of my de facto of where Toledo ends up. I think that's going to be a very good game. You have a 10-2 versus 11-2, 11-1, excuse me. I think that's going to be a major one. But like I said, Liberty sitting there at 12-0. So
yeah, you got to hope for a Liberty loss.
Conference championship week. It's usually some type of chaos at some point. But we're excited to see it.
All right, AJ, give me your MAC championship prediction. Toledo is the favorite by 7.5. So give me who's winning and your score prediction.
I think Toledo ends up winning it, but I think it's going to be closer than what people think. So I'm going Toledo 24-17.
Toledo 24-17. So okay. So Miami would cover the spread in that one. I like it. I'm going to also go Toledo. I know I've said it before. It's so hard to beat a team twice in the same year. But I think Toledo's got the edge in most aspects, and now they've got a massive edge in the quarterback department. I like the Rockets in this one. I think this one's going to be a higher scoring affair than their last matchup. And I think this one's going to be let's go 31 31-24. So Miami still covers the spread, but I'm going to say 31-24 in favor of the Rockets at Ford Field. Book it. That is my prediction.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the MAC Championship preview. If you have any questions, please feel free to tweet at us, inbox us, whatever. We'd love to get your feedback and love to kind of defend our picks and what we said here. But I'm looking forward to it. I'll be up at Ford Field on Saturday, and it should be a great game. I'll be up there early, just trying to meet with fans from both sides, trying to meet with people, hang out, kind of enjoy the day. And yeah, really looking forward to this championship game. It's going to be a lot of fun. Two great Titans in the Mid-American Conference going head to head. Going to be a great time. AJ, any other thoughts before we sign off on championship weekend?
Hard to believe championship weekend's here already. It doesn't seem like that was that long ago we were doing media day stuff. So we're here. December 1st is right around the corner, which means it's championship weekend and bowl season shortly after that. So a lot of things will get determined and sorted out here after this weekend. Not only the champion of the game or champion of the conference, rather, but where teams are going bowling this year. We'll know that on Sunday.
Yep,
so,
Selection Sunday.
Selection Sunday. We're gonna have a jam-packed couple of days here coming up. I know next week's show will be a lot of fun, kind of breaking down the championship game along with what schools going where when they go bowling.
Can't wait for it. Can't wait. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Like I said, I'll be up there at Ford Field on Saturday. If you want to meet up, reach out, say, hey, we'd love to meet up, and we'll try to make it happen. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Check us out on all of our socials, www.thecscpodcast.com, over on Instagram at the CSC Podcast, on Facebook at the CSC Podcast, all action all the time. And then, of course, on Twitter X at College Sport Pod. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
See you.